Hi. So in this video we're going to continue our discussion on positional and keyword arguments, and we'll just jump straight into the code. So let's look at a regular function, the way that we've been used to defining them so far. So we'll take my func with three parameters, a, b, and c. And so we define them this way, and we'll just do a function that prints out whatever gets passed in. So a equals, we'll print the first value, b equals, we'll print the second value, and we'll print the third value, and we'll format that by passing in a, b, and c. Okay, so this function takes three parameters, a, b, and c. That's their local names in this context. And we can call it by just calling myfunc, passing in three different values. These are the arguments of the function. So when we do that, as we can see, a was 1, b was 2, and c was 3. And that was determined by the position of the arguments. This was the first position, so it went into a. This was the second, went into b, and so on. So the one thing is, you cannot just call myfunc with less than 3 arguments. If you try and call myfunc with 2 arguments, you'll get a runtime error. So myfunc is missing one required positional argument, c. It even tells you which one. Right? Fair enough. So to avoid that, we can go ahead and create default values. So if we don't pass in something, let's say we set a default for b, we'll set the default for b equal to 2. Now this, as we saw in the lecture, will not work, right? If we try and do that, I'll just take that. If we try and run this, then Python complains and says, nope, you can't do that. You have a non-default argument that follows a default argument. Remember what we said? Once you specify a default argument, right, a default parameter, every parameter after that has to have a default value. So we can fix that by saying that the default for C will be 3. So that works. Now we can call myfunc. Now we can certainly pass it just as before, let's say 3 different values, and I'll make it 10, 20, 30, so we can differentiate the 20 and the 30 from the default values 2 and 3. And when we do that, we see that it actually got the values 10, 20, and 30. As expected, we passed in 3 arguments. It got mapped to the 3 parameters. But now, because of the default values, we can call myfunc without passing everything in. We can just pass 10 and 20, and we won't specify the third argument, which is the c parameter. And so when you do that, you can see that a is 10, b is 20. That's what we specified in the arguments here. But c defaulted to its value of 3, which was defined right there. Of course, we can go one step further and just pass in 10. And as you can see, b is 2 and c is 3. It took the default values. Now, of course, you can always, if you want, make everything have a default, in which case all the parameters are now optional. All the arguments are now optional. So if we say myfunc, well, then you can see a was 1, b was 2, and c was 3. So that's how the defaults work. The next thing we want to look at are keyword arguments or named arguments. Now that doesn't have anything to do with the function. So I'm just still going to redefine myfunc, and let me just copy paste. We'll keep it very similar, except I won't let a have a default. So in this case, we always have to specify at least one argument when we call myfunc. And it will do the same thing as before, just print out the values for a, b, and c. So with named arguments, we can do something like this. We can say c equals 20, b equals 10. Well, actually, let's make it so it's in increasing order. So c is 30, b is 20, and a is 10. And when we call that, you can see that a has a value of 10, b has a value of 20, and c has a value of 30. The names that we use in these keyword arguments when we call the function must match the parameter names that were used when we defined the function. That's the only thing. But the order is now irrelevant. It is not positional, it is based on the name that we give to the argument. Now you can mix that. We could say myfunc 10 and then c equals 30 and b equals 20. That's perfectly fine to do. What will happen here is that this is going to be, the first argument is going to be positional. So it's going to go into a. These are keyword arguments, and therefore it will use the name that we have. So Even though it's in the second position, it will assign 30 to C, which is the third parameter, and 20 will be B. So if we call that, we have, as expected, A is 10, B is 20, and C is 30. Now, of course, B and C have default values, so we don't have to specify everything. So we could say 10 for the first argument, which will be a positional argument, therefore it's going to go straight into A. And we could say C is equal to 30, and we omit B equal to 20. So now we have A is 10, B is the default that we have here, and C is 30, because we specified that. So if you have default values and you're using keywords, you don't have to specify all the values. They're optional. And unlike the case when you have optional values or optional arguments by having default parameter values, where you do have to specify them in the same order when you call, right? So in a case like this, 10, 20, 30, 20 went into B, 30 went into C. We could not have written 10, 20 and expect 20 here to go into C. It has to go into B. With the keywords, we don't have that problem. So that's how we can get around it, is by using keyword arguments or named arguments. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.